Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a stack of sources today that honestly paints a picture of two very different worlds colliding in real time.
Yeah, it's a jarring contrast, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Right, because on one side we have the very messy kinetic reality of a new war in the Middle East, battleships, oil prices, that whole heavy industry crisis.
hmm
And then on the other side we have this silent, almost invisible revolution happening in code, specifically with the launch of DeepSeek V4.
Right. Usually when we talk about these AI breakthroughs, we're looking at clean labs and highly polished press releases. But today we're looking at how global chaos might actually be the perfect cover for a massive technological leap.
Yeah, the smokescreen effect. And that is really the core mission of our deep dive today. We need to figure out how a geopolitical crisis is effectively hiding a huge shift in AI capability, and obviously why that matters for your wallet and your workflow.
Because it will definitely affect both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But before we get to the war itself, we have to talk about the pregame show.
Mm.
Because the buildup to this DeepSeek V4 launch was, well, it was hostile.
Hostile is definitely the right word for it. The source material suggests this was a highly coordinated legal and PR offensive.
Right. We saw Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google essentially forming a coalition. The big American three just coming together to accuse DeepSeek of data theft.
And the timing there wasn't an accident. They dropped these accusations right as V4 was scheduled to go live. The narrative they clearly wanted to push was that DeepSeek isn't actually innovating. They're just stealing.
Which brings us to the irony that a lot of the sources pointed out. I mean, the accusation is that DeepSeek stole data from the American giants. But let's be real here for a second. Where do the American giants get their data?
They scraped the entire open internet.
Right. They ingested books, articles, code repositories, mostly without asking anyone. So accusing DeepSeek of stealing data that was arguably already scraped without permission in the first place, it feels a little circular, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the classic fruit of the poisonous tree argument, but applied to corporate intellectual property. Our sources actually call it explicitly hypocritical.
I mean, it's hard not to see it that way.
But there is a nuance here we should unpack. The American companies are arguing that there is a fundamental difference between scraping raw human data and scraping synthetic data.
Meaning data generated by another AI model.
Exactly. They are claiming that DeepSeek is effectively distilling their proprietary models by training on their outputs.
I get the distinction there, but does that actually hold water legally? Like if I read a book you wrote and I learn from it and then I write a better book, is that theft? Or is that just learning?
Right.
It feels like the American companies are trying to build a legal moat around the concept of learning itself.
And that is the billion-dollar question right now. Frankly, the sources suggest that the legal standing here is shaky at best. There's just no global consensus on whether training on synthetic data actually constitutes copyright infringement.
Which kind of leads us to the darker conclusion found in the reports.
Yeah, that this wasn't really about the law at all. It was about fear.
Fear that V4 is actually just better.
Fear that it's completely dominant.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. You don't band together with your biggest domestic rivals to sue a competitor unless that competitor poses a legitimate existential threat.
Right. You just ignore them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If V4 was just a slight incremental improvement, they wouldn't have given it the time of day.
Ugh.
The sheer aggression of this coalition signals that the leaks regarding V4's performance are likely true.
And we're going to get into those specs in a minute because they are wild.
They really are. But the goal here was to bury the launch news under a mountain of litigation, so enterprise customers would be too scared to even touch the new model.
Classic FUD strategy. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you
Yeah.
can't beat the tech, you just poison the well.
Precisely.
But this is where the story takes that massive sharp left turn we mentioned at the top, the Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
The American giants had their PR cannons loaded, the lawsuits were drafted, and then the world literally blew up.
The new conflict in the Middle East.
Right. It started yesterday, and it immediately just sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
It's tragic, obviously. The human cost is awful.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at it purely through the analytical lens of this deep dive, the timing is almost unbelievable.
Yeah, the sources are saying this war effectively saved the V4 launch.
It absolutely did. Think about the global news cycle. There is only so much bandwidth in the media. When you have the Strait of Hormuz closing and battleships moving into position, nobody cares about a copyright dispute between tech companies.
The scandal they tried to manufacture just evaporated.
Completely. It's not on the front page. It's not even on the business page right now.
Because the business page is entirely freaking out about oil.
Correct. And this is where the economic analysis in our sources gets really fascinating. We need to look at the calculus of the market right now.
Let's do it.
Do you remember back in January 2025, the DeepSeek R1 launch?
Oh, vividly. That was the $1 trillion haircut.
Exactly.
R1 came out, and it was so incredibly cheap and efficient that the market suddenly realized the massive profit margins for U.S. tech companies were going to collapse. And tech stocks just tanked.
Right, it was a massive deflationary shock. AI making things exponentially cheaper, it's actually bad for companies whose whole business model is selling incredibly expensive compute.
That was the defining narrative.
Yeah, so now fast forward to today. V4 is launching. And based on the leaks, it is likely even more deflationary than R1 was.
So logic dictates we should be seeing another massive tech crash right now.
But we aren't seeing a tech crash. We're seeing a war crash.
Wow, right.
The market is panicking, yes. Stocks are definitely down. But why are they down? Because oil is spiking. Because global supply chains are threatened.
The narrative completely shifted.
Yes, the narrative isn't Chinese AI is destroying U.S. profit margins anymore. The narrative is global war is destroying everything.
So DeepSeek V4 enters the market, potentially causing this massive disruption to the fundamental cost of intelligence, but it gets zero blame for the market volatility.
It's the perfect camouflage.
Yeah.
One of the sources puts it brilliantly, actually. They say DeepSeek V4 will not be considered part of the calculus.
That makes total sense. If the S&P 500 drops 5% this week, every analyst on CNBC is going to blame the Strait of Hormuz.
Exactly. And meanwhile, DeepSeek is quietly gaining market share. Developers are starting to switch over. And by the time the dust finally settles from this geopolitical crisis,
V4 is already the new industry standard.
you got it.
It's literally like robbing a bank while the building next door is on fire. Everyone is just staring at the flames.
That's a great way to put it.
But, okay, I want to dig into why the incumbents were so genuinely terrified in the first place. We need to talk about the technical leap here. Because while the world is watching the war, the AI industry is witnessing a really powerful shift.
Yeah. The underlying tech is shifting dramatically.
And the sources are throwing around some very heavy terminology here. We've got manifold constrained hyperconnections, the Enneagram DeepSeek sparse attention.
It reads like a very dense technical paper.
It does, and I want to try to break these down. Because usually when we see tech buzzwords like hyperconnections, it's just marketing fluff. But looking at these specs, this actually seems to be addressing the fundamental bottleneck of current LLMs, which is compute efficiency.
That's exactly right.
So let's start with the manifold constrained hyperconnections, or MHC.
Okay.
Now, my understanding of manifold learning, just from back in my own data science days, is that you're essentially trying to map high-dimensional data into a lower-dimensional space just to find the actual underlying structure. Are they applying that concept to the neural connections themselves?
That is exactly what they are doing.
Oh.
And honestly, it's a huge deal.
Give us the plain English vibe on this.
Sure. So in a traditional dense model, every neuron is potentially connected to every single other neuron in the subsequent layer.
Right.
It's a massive amount of computation. And the problem is a lot of it is totally redundant. The model is calculating millions of relationships that just don't matter to the final output.
Right. It's like trying to find a path from point A to point B by driving down every single road on the map, including the ones heading in the totally wrong direction.
That's a really good analogy. So what MHC does is it mathematically constrains those connections to the manifold, meaning the specific topological shape where the relevant data actually lives.
Okay.
It basically forces the model to only process the connections that are statistically likely to be meaningful.
So it's not just sparse in a random way, it's actually topologically optimized.
Yes, it creates a network that is far less dense but retains extremely high accuracy. You're doing significantly less math to get the exact same, or honestly, even better answer.
And less math directly translates to more speed and lower cost.
Exactly.
Which dovetails perfectly into the next term from the leaks. DeepSeek sparse attention, or DSA. Now, we all know attention is all you need. That's been the transformer motto for years. But attention is insanely computationally expensive. Because it scales quadratically right. If you double the context window, the amount of work the model has to do quadruples.
Traditionally, yes, because the model has to look at every single token and compare it to every other token to truly understand the context. What DSA does is it changes that core mechanism. Instead of a global attention span where everything focuses on everything all at once, it uses a dynamic sparse pattern. It essentially identifies the signal tokens and just ignores the noise tokens.
Oh, wow. So if I feed it a 100-page legal document, it's not... burning GPU energy analyzing the word the on page 5 relative to the word and on page 95.
Right. Unless those specific words are somehow mathematically crucial to your query, it skips that comparison. It
Yeah.
effectively gives the AI the ability to skim and focus rather than reading every single letter with a magnifying glass every time you ask it a question.
Again, it all comes back to efficiency.
Always.
Okay, then we have this thing called the Enneagram. And this one sounds way more neuroscience than computer science to me. An Enneagram is a memory trace in the human brain. How on earth are they using this in a transformer architecture?
This is honestly one of the most novel parts of the entire leak. So current LLMs don't really have memory in the way we humans think of it. They just have a context window.
Right, it's a blank slate every time until you paste the prompt in.
Exactly. And once that context window is full, the oldest information just falls off the edge. You lose it.
Yeah.
The Enneagram architecture suggests they've built a persistent memory structure. It's a way to encode key information into a compressed state that can be instantly retrieved later without having to keep all of it in the active context window.
Wait, so it's literally like adding a long-term storage hard drive directly to the RAM.
That's a very similar concept,
Yeah.
yeah. It allows the model to handle massive ongoing tasks, like, say, analyzing an entire enterprise code base or reviewing a huge series of legal briefs over weeks without getting confused or hallucinating because it lost the thread of the original conversation.
That is massive for enterprise use cases. And finally, the last piece of the technical suite mentioned is sparse FP8 decoding. Now, we know FP8 floating point 8 is a lower precision format than the standard FP16. Usually, you're making a trade-off there. You trade precision for speed. Are the leaks claiming they cracked the code on keeping the quality up while using 8-bit math?
That is exactly the claim. Moving to 8-bit math doubles your throughput immediately.
But usually you lose the nuance. The model gets a little dumber.
Right. But DeepSeek seems to have found a way to use sparse matrices combined with FP8 to keep the error rate incredibly low. So when you stack all of these things together, the MHC, the DSA, the enneagrams, the FP8,
You get a monster.
you get a model that is heavily rumored to absolutely dominate reasoning and coding benchmarks while running on a fraction of the hardware required by something like Gemini or GPT-5.
And that hardware efficiency is exactly why the American giants are so terrified. Because if DeepSeek can sell GPT-5 level intelligence for, say, 1/10 of the price, the entire business model of the incumbents just breaks.
It completely evaporates. You can't compete with better and cheaper. You can usually only fight one or the other.
Right, you're either the premium expensive product or the cheap lower quality alternative. You can't be both.
Exactly.
But here's the real kicker for me. If this was just a proprietary closed model, we'd basically be talking about DeepSeek becoming the next global monopoly. But the sources emphasize one critical detail about V4.
It's open source.
It is open source.
And this is the ripple effect. This is why the next few months in the tech world are going to be absolutely wild.
Yeah, the source specifically mentions a 4-month timeline. Walk me through that. Why 4 months?
That's the estimated digest period for the open source community. Since the weights and the architecture of V4 are fully open, the global developer community, the posts on GitHub, Hugging Face, all these local llama enthusiasts, they're going to tear this thing apart.
Right, they're going to reverse engineer it.
Exactly. They will reverse engineer the MHC. They will figure out how to replicate the Enneagram memory structure.
So they'll basically port these cutting-edge features into their own smaller models.
Yes. You'll likely see a tiny 7 billion parameter model running locally on a standard laptop that uses engrams and sparse attention to completely outperform a massive server-side model from just last year.
Wow.
The source is predicting that within 4 months, these specific nuggets of tech will just be the standard baseline in every single open source model out there.
That is a staggering acceleration of the timeline. It means the technical moat for the big incumbent companies isn't just breached, it's completely filled in with concrete.
It effectively commoditizes high-end reasoning.
Let's pause on that phrase for a second. Commoditizes reasoning. It sounds a bit abstract. For the listener who is maybe driving to work right now, or the developer listening while they're debugging code, what does that actually mean for their day-to-day life and their wallet?
It means the fundamental cost of digital intelligence drops to near zero. If you're an individual developer, the cost of having an AI instantly write your unit tests or refactor your entire code base becomes practically negligible. You won't even think about the API cost.
Right.
And if you're a business, the cost of deploying automated customer support, complex data analysis, or agentic workflows just crashes.
It's basically deflationary pressure on steroids.
It really is. And this brings us right back to the war we started talking about.
The geopolitical shield.
Exactly. Because we have this incredible tug of war happening in the global economy right now. The war in the Middle East is driving physical prices up.
Mm.
Oil, shipping, global logistics, that is pure inflation.
Right, everything in the physical world gets more expensive.
But at the exact same time, V4 is driving the cost of doing digital business down. Productivity, coding, analysis generation, that is pure deflation.
And right now, the entire world is exclusively looking at the inflation side of the equation.
Because it's visible.
Right, they're looking at the gas pump. They aren't seeing that the actual cost of thinking of generating intelligence is about to fall off a cliff in the background.
And that asymmetry is the real opportunity here. While the broader market is completely distracted by the crisis, smart organizations and individual developers will be rapidly adopting these new tools. The source material explicitly mentions the 2026 context, this idea that we honestly haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, I loved that quote. It said something like, if we thought that 2026 would be a year of major breakthroughs, we haven't seen anything yet. It heavily implies this stealth launch is really just the opening move on the board.
It implies the rate of improvement is actively accelerating. We aren't hitting an asymptote or a plateau with LLMs. The combination of much better underlying architecture like the MHC, combined with the power of open collaboration, means we're entering a cycle of extremely rapid iteration.
It's funny looking back at the corporate plot we started this deep dive with. The big American giants tried to stop this entirely with lawsuits. They tried to claim copyright infringement to slow it down. But you can't sue an architectural breakthrough.
No, you really can't.
You can't copyright a pure math concept like manifold constrained connections.
I mean, you can certainly try in court, but once it's open source, the cat is permanently out of the bag. The knowledge has been globally distributed. You can't recall an idea from millions of hard drives.
And the geopolitical shield just absolutely ensured that the distribution happened quietly without a massive media circus warning everybody. It's almost poetic in a dark way. The chaos of the old world, war, oil, physical territory, effectively protected the birth of the new world.
It is a profound irony, but history is usually messy like that.
It is. So let's try to wrap this all up for everyone listening. We have this foiled plot where the incumbents tried to kill a competitor with legal warfare. That plot completely failed because a literal war broke out, shifting the entire world's attention.
Yep.
DeepSeek V4 launches in the shadows of this global crisis. It brings massive technical leaps, anagrams, sparse attention, hyperconnections that fundamentally change the baseline economics of AI. And because it's open source, that tech is going to be in literally everyone's hands by midsummer.
That perfectly sums it up. The daily news cycle is incredibly dark right now, but the actual tech stack is getting brighter and much more accessible than ever.
It definitely leaves me with one final thought, though. We've spent this whole time analyzing how a massive technological event like V4 can basically slip entirely under the radar just because we're all distracted by a geopolitical crisis. It really makes you wonder if something this big is happening right now while we're all looking at the Middle East.
Yeah, what else are we missing?
Exactly. What other scientific breakthroughs or massive corporate deals or societal shifts are happening right now entirely in the dark simply because the global spotlight is pointed somewhere else?
That is definitely the question that keeps you up at night.
It really is. And on that cheerful note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Keep your eyes open out there. We'll see you next time.